All right, everyone. Welcome to today's Connected Sessions. My name is Brian Banville. I'm the Career Services Manager at Learn Academy, and I'm very excited for today's event. For those of you who may not know, Learn Academy is a web development bootcamp. It is San Diego's, in fact, it's actually Southern California's first web development bootcamp. And we are a full-time 4-month immersive program that particularly specializes in working with career transitioners. So we teach full stack development, which means we teach our students how to build web applications on both the front end and the back end. We have a bigger mission as well, which is to build, strengthen, and diversify the tech community in San Diego and beyond. Now, part of hosting meetups like this one is to give back and offer our knowledge to anyone who is interested and to engage with our alumni who are all absolutely fantastic. And truly at Learn, we strive to create an inclusive and brave space. A brave space allows people to express ideas, challenge one another in a positive way, and learn from one another, but never to disparage or cause harm. We consider these meetups an extension of our classroom, and we want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to keep our meetups a positive experience for all of you. So if on the extremely rare off chance any of the participants in our meetups or in our classroom violate our inclusive and brave space or use insulting or profane language or image, we will remove that person from the meeting and report that person if necessary. But I say that so that we can all lean forward and engage in today's talk. And so with that, I welcome you into our brave space today. And I am very excited to introduce one of our wonderful alumni, Lea Ann Bradford, who's going to be speaking today about some tips and tricks that she learned for open source projects and contributing to open source code, which I'm really excited for her to talk about today. I'll let Lea Ann introduce herself a little bit more, but currently she is a developer at Notch 8, which is a web development agency based in San Diego. Again, she's one of Learn's wonderful alumni. And with that, Lea Ann, I give the microphone over to you.
All right, great. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So today I'm going to talk about open source, and basically I've been working, I learned some open source tricks over the past year, so I just wanted to share them with people that are thinking about getting involved in open source. And so that's where this talk evolved out of. So first off, I'm Lea Ann. I am a software developer at Notch 8. I am also a proud Learn Academy alum. I was in the Charlie 2016 cohort, so it's been exactly 4 years since I went through the program. If you don't know who Notch 8 is, we're also kind of a sister company. We have the same founders as Learn Academy, so that is kind of a nice thing that we get to be part of the Learn Academy space and environment. So. But we are a consultancy that we build applications for clients, for different clients. We have a few projects we build for ourselves, but mostly we're building for other people. I actually did my Learn Academy internship for Notch 8, and I've really been working as a developer here ever since then. But at Notch 8, when we've developed client projects, we use open source software. For example, we use Ruby and Rails, but we are especially involved in an open source community called Samvera. We like to contribute back to open source because without these open source tools, our work would just be so much harder. We'd have to duplicate things over and over again for our customers, and we can just leverage tools that have already been developed. So over the past year, these are some of the projects that I have contributed to, and they are all part of the Samvera community. There's gems and engines here. I also was a proud participant in the Hacktoberfest for 2019. That was really exciting for me. So the term open source really began as a way to describe a type of software development, but it's not limited to software projects. In my talk today, I'm really going to focus on contributing to open source software, particularly code. But anyway, open source really refers to something people can modify and share because its design is publicly accessible. And open source software in particular is software in which the authors have decided to let others not only view and learn from the code, but we can poke at it, we can share it, we can copy it and alter it. The nice part of, my favorite part about open source code is that it's developed with a collaborative approach usually, and it's transparent, and it's community oriented, and it's open to everybody. So what is contributing? I'm going to focus most of this talk on contributing code, but there's other important ways to contribute to open source. It might be something as simple as using a tool and just thanking the team publicly for what they've given you to use. You can promote projects at events or promote projects on social media. That's a contribution. You can translate documentation into another language if that is something in your skill set. Just be really creative, and you can think about your own personal strengths and then find a way to leverage your personal strengths for a project. There's really no limits or boundaries. Everybody loves the help. If it's something that you can think of that you think the project would help the project, I'm sure that people would be willing to accept your help. Some of the code related things you can do are just submitting issues. You can do code reviews. You can write documentation. You can fix small things like typos. You can do pull requests, which add features, fix bugs. You can do maintenance work like upgrading dependencies, and you can even write unit tests. So why would you want to contribute to open source? There's really a lot of reasons. Personally, for personal growth, when you know the public is able to read your code, you're really going to have a tendency to be more careful and make it better. You're really going to learn about clean code, which is code that's readable and maintainable. You're going to receive code reviews from different people than the people you work with, and they're really going to help you learn new ways of doing things. The one thing that I learned is that you really have to think about the big picture. For example, like backwards compatibility. If you don't want to introduce changes, that is going to break everything for everyone who used the product before. So you really have to be careful not to make breaking changes when you're doing writing code. So it really makes you open up your, expand your view of not just the thing you're working on, but how does it affect the entire project. Professionally, you really get to meet people with shared interests to you, and you get to be part of a like-minded community. So that's really awesome. It really deepens your knowledge. So you're no longer just using a piece of software, you really gain an understanding of how things are actually working in that software. You can add features or fixes that you would like to see. Like maybe the maintainers don't have time to work on it, but it's something you would always like to see. You can add it, try and build it and contribute it back. And it gives you a chance to contribute regularly to the libraries and languages and packages that you might use on a daily basis. And let's face it, it's really good for job prospects. It looks great on your resume. Many companies love to see your public contributions. So that's a really big plus for you personally. Great, so you've decided you're going to jump in and you're going to contribute to open source. So where do you start? I'd like to compare this contributing code to open source to like painting a room. For example, it's like 90% prep work. You have to clean, you have to move things out of the way, you've got to do the patching of the holes and prepping the surfaces, and you got to tape off and cover things that need to be protected. Then you have like the 10% of the work that's just slapping on the paint. So let's get started. First, you need to find a project. This might be the most challenging part of the process. There's plenty of places to find projects that are welcoming to new contributors, and I've listed a few here. So Kevin, can you post these links in the chat for everybody so that you guys have them for future reference? But there's places where you can look. I would make sure that you're going to find something that's written in a language that you're familiar with, because you really want to choose a project that you're already familiar with or one that you can easily become familiar with. So I recommend choosing something you already know would be a good plan. And then before you get your heart set on a project, you might find something, but you need to make sure to do your due diligence and investigate if the project is really going to be good enough for you. You want to check if it's active. Is there enough issues? Who are the contributors? Is it friendly to newcomers? So I pulled up a couple of projects here that I contributed to, and we can take a look at it. So this is Project Blacklight, and it is a part of the Samvera community. And you can see in the code tab, when you're in the code tab of GitHub, you can see right here, the last commit was 17 days ago. And then we have another project here called Bulk Racks, which Untitled maintains. It's an open source project as well. And you can see here the last commit was 14 days ago. So those are important things to make sure that the last commit wasn't over a year ago. You want to make sure it's recent. You want to make sure, is there enough issues? We have 40 in Bulk Racks. I would recommend picking a project that has over 100. So Project Blacklight. When you're getting started, you want to have a wide variety of projects to choose from. And they have nice labels, so you can see, is this going to have a project that has a good variety of projects for you to pick from, and is it going to be suiting your strengths? And you also want to know, is it friendly to newcomers? So you want to see, are there any beginner-friendly issues? So I can see Project Blacklight has a tag for beginner-friendly, so does Bulk Racks. Bulk Racks is the label is good first issue. So these are things you can look at when you're getting started, is let me pick something that might be a good first issue. The other thing you want to look at is the contributors. So contributors you'll find on the right bar in GitHub. And here, this one is really friendly to me. I can see Rob Kaufman is one of them. I can see some of my coworkers. I can see myself in here. So I would say, oh, I know those people. That would be a good project to look at. As well as in Blacklight, you can see there's 77 contributors. So they have a really large community of people that you can reach out to for help. So I would say that is really friendly for newcomers. The other thing you want to see is a contributor's guide. So when you scroll through the documentation, there is a contributing code guideline, and you can click on it. And it will go through a lot of information that you need to know: how to add a ticket, how to do your pull requests, and what to expect from a code review. And this is good. This shows that there's a mailing list, and there's also a Slack channel that you can log into and become part of. So those are some things that you really want to look out for when you're looking for a project to work on. Some red flags is to make sure, you want to make sure that there's an open source license. You want to make sure there's a contributor's guide. You want to make sure that there's a code of conduct. If you have a really small number of issues, say 2 issues, 1 contributor, and the last code commit was 2 years ago, it's probably not a good project for you to pick. So you want to start your search over again. Or if the documentation is really bad. I mean, it's possible that you are using a project a lot and you want to write the documentation. That would be great. But if you need the documentation to get started, then you probably don't want to choose that project, and you just start your search over again. The next thing you want to pay attention to is, like, you've got your project picked. Now you need to make yourself ready. I just think the biggest thing you want to do is read about the project. I can't stress it enough. The more you familiarize yourself with the project, the easier it's going to be to reach out for help. Some projects have a wiki that you can read through to get more information about it. You can read through all of the documentation, how to install everything that it has for you, how to use it. When you are looking at the contributing guidelines, pay extra attention to things like how to write commit messages and how to name your branches. For example, at Notch 8, we like to name our branches with the issue number, so we know that the issue number, that the code belongs to a specific issue. Some projects are going to have different naming conventions. So, and each project is unique. So you really need to study that and know that before you get started, because you don't want to have to redo everything just because you named something wrong. I would say the next big part is knowing the project, but knowing Git. Kevin, here's the link to Understanding Git. There's a tutorial here. So if you don't know how to clone a repository, how to create a branch, or how to make pull requests, even if you just want to brush up on some Git skills, I recommend doing a tutorial, and Git has a good one right online. So What about imposter syndrome? From my experience, I did not want to go into open source. I got assigned to it through Notch 8 as part of my job, and I was really panicked about it. I just was not excited about it at all. I just felt like I'm not good enough. There's going to be all these experts, and I'm going to embarrass the company. I'm going to embarrass myself. I was so worried my code wasn't good enough. But honestly, putting myself out there and being vulnerable was just a fantastic way to grow as a developer. And your employer likes to see that progress. So you can see your first commit's not very good. And as you go through and make more, people, they can see or learn publicly is important. So for me, breaking out of my comfort zone, it was really hard, but it helped me push through to a higher skill level. One thing I learned is I went into a group project with a community sprint. So there's people from all over the country. It turned out I was afraid of not being good enough, but it turned out I mentored other people that were in this sprint. So I was able to pair program, and I was like in the middle. So I was really able to help newer developers come along, as well as get help from more senior developers. So it was such a great experience all around. Another thing that happened to me when I was contributing was, and I was afraid of this happening, is what if your code isn't good enough and they reject it? Well, that happened to me personally. It wasn't that it wasn't good enough. I signed myself a ticket, I submitted a PR, all the changes met the requirements of the ticket, but when the maintainers saw it, they were like, well, you know what, we want to extract this out into a gem and use it across several projects. So they went in a different direction. And it was like a big fear of mine. I thought it would be really devastating, but as it turned out, it was just a learning experience, and it wasn't a big deal at all. And people were very thankful. They were nice and welcoming. And I got actual public thank yous and kudos for the work I did, because it showed them a different way to do something that they weren't expecting. So it turned out to be a good experience. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Okay, so now you're ready. The first thing you're going to do is assign yourself to a ticket, and you're going to make sure that somebody else is not assigned to the ticket, because you do not want to duplicate the work that another developer is already doing. You're going to want to create a fork of the repository and then clone it. So if you're not a contributor, you'll be able to clone the repository and you'll make all your changes, and then you'll go to push your code and it's going to tell you, nope, you don't have access rights. So don't go to the maintainers of the project and say, hey, can I have write access to your code? Like, that's like asking someone for keys to the car and you're just knocking on their door. They don't know you. So they're not going to give that to you, but it's easy to get around it. You just do a fork of the repository, you clone your fork of the repository, and you create your pull request from the fork. It's pretty easy. And I'm going to show you real quick right now how to do that. Let me see if I can get this. So in bulk racks or any GitHub project, if you go up here in the upper right-hand side, there's a fork button, and that's all you do is you click fork, you choose your account, and that's it. That's how you fork a repository. It's very simple. And while it's thinking, we'll go back. The next thing you want to do is create a branch. Don't develop on master. It doesn't matter if you're doing open source work or personal work. I just can't tell you enough. Even if you're on your own fork, never develop on master. Don't do it. It's a bad habit. Anyway, you want to make sure to follow the naming conventions when you create a branch that are outlined in the contributing guide if they have any. And then once you get everything cloned down, you want to start it up and run the tests. You want to make sure there's no failing tests so that you can be sure any changes that you make aren't breaking anything. So once you get everything all up and running, all the tests are green, that's the time that you can start writing your own code. So you can write your own tests and write your code. Make sure you have good test coverage for any code that you're adding or changing. And once you get your code, your changes made and your test passing, then you want to run the whole test suite again and make sure that you didn't break anything when you made your changes, that you didn't break anything for the rest of the project. And then you want to check also for linting issues. Some projects are will have linters when you run that'll like make you correct white space and random things like that, but it should be in the contributing guidelines. So now you need to make a pull request. You commit your changes and make sure, again, you follow the contributing guidelines for how to message your commits, and you create a pull request. And you're going to have a target branch, which will be the master branch on the project repository. And you're going to choose your branch from your fork as a source branch. And after you choose your branches, you'll be able to scroll down and you'll be able to review the differences between the master branch and your work, and you can see your changes and how what it used to be and what you were wanting to change it to. This is a really good time to catch anything you didn't mean to commit. For example, like debugging statements, if you accidentally left console.log somewhere. You want to make sure that you don't have any sensitive data or API keys or login info. And let me show you real quick back in GitHub what that will look like. So if we go to Project Blacklight and we go to pull requests, we have a pull request here about bookmark actions. And you can see when you hover over it, the target branch is Blacklight master, and then the source branch is a person's fork of this. So as we go ahead and we open it, you can look at the files changed, and you can see this is what it, on the left is what it was before, and on the right is what the person wants to change it to. And so that's a good way you can review it and find any things you accidentally meant to commit. You want to make sure that you're only committing the changes related to the issue that you're working on. So for example, if you find a typo in a different file, you don't want to fix that typo. What you want to do is fix what your ticket is, and then open a separate pull request for that typo, because you don't want to mix and match things. You want to be very clear. You want to be very descriptive when you open your pull requests. So you want to have screenshots or screencasts if possible, and then step-by-step instructions on how to test your changes. And then you wait, and you wait, and you wait some more. So once you submit it, you're going to end up having to wait a while before somebody looks at it. Be patient, honestly. Maintainers are likely volunteers like the rest of us, and we're all busy, so they will get to it when they're available. If it's been a week or two, it's okay to follow up. So how do you know who to follow up with? So I think my secret to knowing who to follow up is to look at a pull request like we have on the screen here, and we can see this is the person who opened the request, but here's the person who's reviewing it. So I would say, oh, no one's looked at my pull request for a whole week. Who's been reviewing PRs? And then I see it's this person. And then I would reach out to Justin and say, hey, I submitted a PR. Can you take a look at it, or let me know who might be able to take a look at it? And that's a good rule of thumb. They're people who are active and they are actually working on the project. So they are probably going to be happy to help you out. As you can see here, you're going to get feedback. For example, this person asked, can you give us screenshots? And they put screenshots of the before and after of what it would look like, and then also some code review. You're going to get code review. And I would say that is one of the best parts. It makes you nervous, but it's actually, oh, sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. Don't be defensive about the code review. This feedback is really what helps you grow as a developer the most. Your coworkers probably give you code reviews and feedback, but these are people out of your normal ecosystem, and you're really going to get a new perspective, and that's awesome. Sometimes they're going to give you feedback and you might not understand what they're asking. Just reach out and just say, I'm not clear, can you help me with this? Most maintainers are really willing to help you through with it. They're excited to have somebody new join in, and they're really great about it. Most of the time they're really great about it. And like I said before, sometimes you submit a PR and the maintainers decide they want to go in a different direction. They might want to expand the scope or do it themselves, and that's okay, really. It doesn't eliminate your contribution at all. You still have made the contribution. You still have the PR submitted. Just because it's closed and not merged doesn't mean you didn't contribute. So it still counts, and you can still add it to your skill set. So finally, it's time to celebrate. You really want to celebrate your achievement. Be excited that you helped out your community and that you shared your knowledge. Make sure to add the experience to your resume and to your portfolio, and brag about it. Brag about it on social media, and brag about it to your coworkers, to your family, and your friends, because you deserve it. And that's it. Thanks, I'm Lea Ann, and I hope you learned something new about open source. And if we have any questions, if you guys typed any questions, I'd be happy to do some answering.
Thanks, Lea Ann. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, TJ is going to fix the unmute yourself option, or you can type any questions that you may have into the chat function.
People can unmute themselves now.
Awesome. Lea Ann, I'm going to kind of start with a question. Mainly something that you said that really stuck out to me is code review. And one thing that I think is really interesting for our alumni in particular, those who might be searching for work and stuff like that, without kind of being in a more formalized setting, we oftentimes lose a lot of that opportunity for code review when we're working on our own side projects. So could you share with people maybe what was one of the biggest lessons that you learned from the code reviews that you received during your open source stuff?
To not be sloppy with your linting, and because code reviews, you'll get a lot of people that'll be like, the tabbing is wrong, and that's like a waste. Honestly, you need to be careful to get that stuff right, because you're not getting like real meaningful feedback. Like, it's stuff and you just, once you work with that a few times, it gets really easy and it's second nature. So and like, don't be defensive when people are giving you feedback, because there's 10 ways or more to do every single task. So each project is going to have its own conventions. They might want to use a certain syntax, and just accept the feedback and learn from it. It's my biggest takeaway. It's like, initially it's kind of like, hey, leave me alone. What's your problem? But it's actually just open up to the feedback. It's usually really helpful. But making sure that you keep your own code clean and neat and tidy, you're not going to get kind of like meaningless feedback that does rub you the wrong way.
Totally. April had a question. April, do you want to unmute yourself and ask, or I can ask for you?
Sure, yes. Thank you so much for coming here and talking to us about open source, Lea Ann. I really appreciate it. I had a question because you were talking about test coverage. What's the rule of thumb for test coverage? Is there something, a standard, or is it something within the contributing documentation?
It's probably per project, but it should be 100%, right? Just gonna say that. I doubt it ever. It's rarely that, but that's what we should strive for.
Do you think in open source, Lea Ann, that there is even more of a demand for test coverage, even
Yes.
within a company?
Yeah, absolutely. Open source is far better, from my experience at Notch 8, which is, but I have worked on site with clients. I've worked full time with different clients, and I can tell you that the open source is better at test coverage.
Awesome. Yeah. My favorite is when people are creating new features and they said, oh, you only need to get to like 20 or 40% test coverage and then we can push it. We'll fix it later. But it depends on the process that each company has. But that's interesting, especially for those maybe on the call or who are listening later, who are interested in honing their testing skills a little bit more, that open source can be that awesome resource for them to really test, because there is such an expectation of it.
And there's already tests on the project, so it helps you have a pattern to follow. I'm trying to write tests brand new when there aren't any, and you're not really sure how to do it is harder. So you have patterns to follow with projects that already have good test coverage. And really, if you're working on a gem and it doesn't have test coverage, then that gem is going to break, and everyone who's used it you know, you might have thousands of users, you can't break their application. They're much more careful about it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thanks.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Just about, I was thinking about this when, Lea Ann, when you were talking about imposter syndrome and like how it's intimidating to start. But the other part of that story is, I don't know when you first got into Blacklight, but if it's been 2 years, but you're kind of like the resident expert on Blacklight. Like anytime there's a Blacklight project, people go to Lea Ann at Notch 8. And even outside of Notch 8, we're on a project with Yale University that has 3 different teams with like 25 people on it. And there was a feature that they wanted to implement in their Blacklight app that I knew Lea Ann had worked on for a Notch 8 project, and your name even came up then.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Well, you're cool.
You're cool.
Well, while we wait, if anyone else has any other questions, Lea Ann, do you have any recommendations, not that you have gone about doing this, but if someone wanted to start their own open source project from scratch, how would someone go about doing that? Do you recommend it? Would you encourage that they start with an open source project first before trying to do their own?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I didn't actually add that, but that is a big way that you can contribute to open source is start your own project. And anything that's on GitHub and public is open source software, so you might already have open source projects that you're working
and
on.
not know it.
Not even know. And that is something I actually realized after I was contributing officially to open source. It's like, I've actually been doing some of these things already and didn't realize it was a contribution. And the rest of the Notch 8 team as well. They're kind of things we do in our daily job, and we don't realize that we've been contributing to open source. And just kind of knowing you're doing it is important, because you realize you're really giving back and contributing to all the other developers out there that are using things or not using things. Sometimes they stumble upon it and just read the code. So
Nice. That's awesome. Any other questions? We have another question from Dwayne. What are some methods for finding trending open source projects, especially ones that align with certain skills and interests?
I think one thing GitHub has is, you can look on your own GitHub profile and it'll recommend for you open source projects. Let me see if I can see that real quick, and I can share my screen if I.
Great.
I can't remember exactly where it was. I can't remember the link to it. I'll have to look it up. But I believe, oh, it's the Explorer. Is it the Explorer tab? Yes. Let me share real quick. And so this is my GitHub repository or GitHub account. And if you go into if you click Explore, it'll find repositories based on your interest, which makes sense because I've worked on some of the like adjacent to these. So this is a good way to find things. And I do Ruby, Rails, and Solar. So this makes sense to me. But that is a good place where you can find it right in GitHub on the Explore tab or Explore link up here.
That's awesome. I think what sometimes people forget with GitHub is that it's almost its own social media platform for developers. And so there are a lot of features in GitHubs that are hidden because we think of it as just something that we use to push code to have like code examples, those types of things, but that there are a lot of different parts of GitHub that are very useful. And that one, I actually didn't even know about the Explore tab, so that's really awesome.
Yeah. That is a good place where you can look.
Awesome. Mina has a question. You mentioned being familiar with the language/framework before contributing to a project. Would you say it's a bad idea to use open source as an opportunity to dabble in a new language? And if so, why?
I would say it depends on your skills. I think that it is a good opportunity for an experienced developer to expand their skill set, so that it might be hard if you're brand new and you're just learning your first language to try and learn a new language when you haven't really, if you have a really good foundation or core concepts of programming, then it might be easier for you. So it's up to the individual, but I think that actually is a great way to expand your skill set if you're ready to move on and learn something new.
Nice.
It was, you need to be able to know it now already or be able to easily learn it. So easily become familiar with the project. So if it uses like patterns that you're familiar with, then it's probably a good way to do that. I would recommend it.
There's another question from Mal. Are there ways to pair up with someone with open source experience as a first-time participant?
So that is, when I worked in an open source project with Notch8, I did a lot of pair programming, but it was a community sprint. So there were people from all over joining, and we were all dedicated for 8 weeks to work on a project. So that's probably not going to be the case for you because you're not doing it through work, but there are Slack channels. I know with like the stuff we work on, there's specific Slack channels for the projects. If you look in the contributing guide or some of the documentation, like there are Slack channels, I would reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking about tackling this issue. Was anyone available interested in pair programming in there? And I bet you would find people who want to do that. There's probably other people like you that want to participate. I would recommend finding a specific issue and seeing if somebody wants to pair up with you on that particular issue, and reach out in the communication channels that the project has. And, you know, or reach out to your friends or the Learn Academy Slack channel if you're part of that. There's lots of people that are probably willing to do it.
Lots of people.
Yeah.
Benjamin asks a really good question. So he says, I work full-time, which takes a lot of my own energy out of me. However, everyone points that contributing to open source is a way to stay relevant and fresh outside of, say, the private work that you're doing for a company. Do you have any thoughts around contributing in free time? Or I know Notch8 is slightly different, but how to have the conversation with your employer that contributing to open source during work hours could be positive, not only for them as an individual, but potentially as for the organization.
Well, for us, I mean, it's an easy sell for Notch8. First off, we're a consultancy, so it markets our developers when you're publicly developing code. Another unique part about Notch8 is that we have learn time. So once we get 8 hours a week of learn time, and we can a lot of us work on like stuff like this in our learn time. And we also are contributing to open source during our paid time as well. So like it's really easy for us, but it's a big sell, like a selling point. If you want to talk to your boss about letting you do it during work hours, you know, see if you do any sales, like, are you trying to get new clients? It depends on the kind of position you have, but it strengthens your skills. And opens your company up to new developers as well. It might be a way for you to recruit other people that work on open source projects. So you can figure out what your company needs and how it would benefit your particular company and try and sell it that way. I am kind of against the whole working outside of work hours on projects. Like, I don't feel like you should have to do that. I tend to I do stuff outside of the work, but it's mostly like I take classes and things like that, but I'm going to try and pare back on it. But I don't like do a lot about, I'm not one who feels like you have to do private projects or extra side projects on the weekends to be hireable. I'm kind of against that philosophy, but I might be in the minority on that. Who knows? So
Yes.
if it's something you're passionate about and you care about, it's not work. So it's fun. So.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's interesting, Lea Ann, you bring up a good point of when people are told, oh, you have to keep relevant and those types of things. I think that it is we think we have to do these like pre-made applications just to show off new tech skills, especially when we're already employed. But I like what you said, Lea Ann, about making sure that it's something that you're passionate about. Then it becomes less about work and it becomes more enjoyable. Someone who wants to continue to learn something because they're just interested in it, I think is totally different than doing something because they feel like they have to stay relevant. So I think that was really, really great to hear as well.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I have been taking like courses for 2 years on C#, which is like, and I work on Ruby on Rails, and neither one are cutting edge technologies. They're old. And I learned so much from the C# class that helped me in my Ruby development that I would have never imagined. But I'm not learning cutting edge technologies, but it's actually really helped my skills get stronger fundamentally. So you don't have to do the brand new bleeding edge stuff. Like, you can learn anything, something that interests you. And I had specific reasons for choosing that. And I didn't know what to expect, but it turned out to be a plus for me. But, again, it's hard if you have a family and anyway, even if you don't have a family, it's hard to like work full time and keep your life, and especially in this time we're in now, it's just hard to stay sane. And it's it's okay if you don't do extra stuff on the weekends. You just don't have to.
Right. Well, Lea Ann, I'm going to close with one more question.
Okay.
Because you continue to love to learn, what is at least one of your top recommendations for a podcast or a book or a class that you've taken that you were like, this was the best, or something that you really like to continue your learning from?
I love doing free code camp.
Cool.
Sometimes I'll just do free code camp on the, like, if I'm bored. I like doing the little code challenges and stuff. So like it's just, I don't know, it's free, it's easy to just do, and it keeps track of your stuff. So that's one. Like, gosh, there's so many, but that one's easy.
Cool.
I would say that. And it covers a wide spectrum of interests that you can dive in and do.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Lea Ann, for this awesome presentation on contributing to open source. We'll do a muted round of applause for you. We will be posting a recording of this on Learn's YouTube channel, as well as the links that Lea Ann shared today. We'll also be posting those on the Meetup group in the comments section. So if you didn't have a chance to cut and paste those, they'll be available on the Meetup where you signed up for today's event on the comment section below. But other than that, everyone have a fantastic rest of the day and a great weekend. And Lea Ann, thank you again for your awesome presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Woo!